From the Bureau of Internal Revenue, we have Juanito H. Balbastre III and Ms. Amelita Escobar. From the National Economic and Development Authority, we have Assistant Director Richard Emerson D. Ballester and Ms. Irene Angela V. Cuya. From the Board of Investments, we have Attorney Eligene D.C. Portoza. From Clark Development Corporation, we have Attorney Agnes De Vanadera and Attorney Gail Barin. From the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Incorporated, we have Attorney Michael Montero. From the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Philippines Incorporated, we have Mr. Shigeru Shimoda. From the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, we have Mr. Tereso O. Panga. From Chevron Philippines Incorporated, we have Attorney Ruth Santiago Loyola. From the Philippine Exporters
discuss that and hear stakeholders themselves, no? Because the stakeholders are obviously the frontliners. They're also in touch with real companies who are operating here in our country. So we want to hear their
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason why I attended today's hearing kasi nakita ko sa resolution nabanggit doon special economic zone. And that's where I'm very interested in. Kasi po, ginagago tayo for the longest time nitong mga locator sa special economic zone. And I'll tell you later how and why. Mr. Chair, meron ba tayo na-invite dito ng mga taga Bureau of Customs? Kasi Bureau of Customs and BIR are conniving para mag-proliferate itong mga bogus na locators. And they're not paying taxes. They import products, raw materials, free of duties and taxes with the precondition that those raw materials will be re-exported. But hindi po na-re-export. Paper export lang po ang nangyari. And then, binibenta dito locally yung mga finished product or sometimes yung raw materials. And yung mga importers, supposed to be, kikita yung bayan natin dahil sa kanilang income tax. Pero paano? Namomonitor ba ng BIR? Itong mga may-ari ng locators? How does the BIR monitors these locators? Kasi the only time that we make money, the country makes money is through the income tax being paid by these locators. In fact, I have list here of some companies na may violation na sa BIR and I need to know ano na ang nangyari sa mga kasong ito. And I need from the BIR a list of these locators na padalahan ng LOA, Letter of Authority. Ano ang follow-up? May nangyari ba o nagkaaregluhan? Ang LOA, Mr. Chair, dito nagiging talamak ang korupsyon. Pinapadala ng sulat ang earring company o locator para pumunta sa opisina ng BIR, magpakita ng mga dokumento na siya ay nagbayad at nag-comply sa requirement ng BIR para magbayad ng tamang buwis. At pagdating doon sa BIR, nagkakaregluhan. That's why I need a list of those companies that were issued LOA and what happened to it. I need a list of those. And then, gusto ko rin po malaman kung meron ng mga nakasuhan na napadala ng letter of authority. Meron na bang nakasuhan o hanggang warning lamang? Kung may nakasuhan, anong nangyari sa kasong yon? Another issue, Mr. Chair, na gusto ko i-raise ay yung ukay-ukay na pumapasok sa PEZA, Special Economic Zone, declared as raw materials to make rugs or to recycle rugs. Pero wag ka, ang laman noon, ukay-ukay. Libre sa buwis. Ni singkong duling walang binabayad na buwis. And then, mind you, yung ukay-ukay na yon, those are discarded second-hand or used clothing sa ibang bansa, Hong Kong, Japan, US, Canada, Australia. Yun po yung mga basura na ng mga damit na imbis na i-recycle, meron kasi mga scheduled for discarding used clothing sa iba't ibang bansa at pinipick up para i-recycle, pero instead na i-recycle, pinapadala itong basura. We have PD 2033 in 1986 na sinasabing bawal ang pagpasok ng used clothing sa bansa. We have RA 4653 na sinasabing bawal ang pagpasok ng mga used clothing sa bansa except to donate sa mga victims ng calamities. At bakit nagkalat itong ukay-ukay sa iba't ibang parte ng Pilipinas? And BIR and Customs not doing about it. May kinikita ba tayo, BIR? Alam niyo ba kung sinong nagpapasok nito mga ukay-ukay? Ni singkong duling, wala kinikita tayo dito. That's why I passed a resolution, a bill na para buwisan na itong ukay-ukay para pagkakitaan naman ng ating gobyerno. But for now, I challenge the BOC and the BIR do something. Kaya nga pinagbawal yan, alam niyo itong batas na ito, dahil it can cause diseases. Those are used clothing. Yun ay mga tinapo na sa basurahan. Tinapo na yan sa dumpsters. At pinulot ng mga magagaling na Pilipino sa ibang bansa at may contact sila para i-ship dito libre. Ito po, Mr. Chair. I need to ask the BIR directly right now. Victoria Wave Special Economic Zone dyan sa may Caloocan. And in October 2021, July 13, excuse me, pumunta po yung mga taga-BIR para inspect itong binanggit kong kumpanya dahil sa tad na violation. Ang tanong, ano na nangyari doon sa pagbisita ng BIR noong July 13 dito sa company ito, OPMC? Meron ba isang matapang dito? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Senator Rafi. I apologize, Your Honor. We don't have the information right now, but we are already asking the concerned Revenue District Office, which conducted the investigation, to provide us information, and we will provide the committee once the data or information are available.
Meron pang isa. Si Commissioner Romeo Lumagul, Jr. He was the one who inspected the factories inside the One Subic Premier Manufacturing Corporation. Okay? At marami siyang nakitang tad-tad na violation. What happened to that inspection? Anong naging resulta? Show it to us. Show it to us na hindi moro-moro lang yung ginawa niyang mga inspeksyon. Kasi Mr. Chair, meron po ako suggest. Siguro it's about time the Congress and the Senate should have an oversight committee na lahat ng LOA na ini-issue ng BIR at Bureau of Customs, kinakailangan monitored natin. Kasi dito sa letter of authority, ang kumikita lamang yung earring officials, yung earring companies na napadala ng LOA at yung agency nag-issue ng LOA. Example, Mr. Chair. Ang deficiency is 1 million. For the sake of argument, lilitan ko lang. 1 million, papadala ng LOA. Magre-report kayo na padala ng LOA. Sasabihin, boss, yung 1 million hindi ko kaya, etc., etc. Sasabihin ng agency nagpadala ng LOA, magkano kaya mo? Boss, ang kaya ko lang is 20,000. Dagdagan mo, boss, ang kaya ko lang 100, last. O sige, yung 900 discounted na. Pero yung 100,000, 50 for you, and 50 for the government. Maghati yung agency at kung sino man nagpadalang LOA at sasabihin yung kalahati, kahit papaano, may resibo, kikita ang gobyerno. Ganon po yung kalokohan sa LOA. Alam niyo po itong taga-BIR at taga-Bureau of Customs. That's the reason what I would like to happen, Mr. Chair, you being the chairman committee, and I'm being the vice, na dapat magkaroon na talaga. Sir, excuse me, I'm talking. Paano ko ma-concentrate, sir, kung nagsalita ka na ano ako? Okay. Well, then, you want to talk? Go ahead, sir. Okay. Sa Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Chair, siguro it's about time mag-create tayo ng tinatawag na oversight to make sure lahat po ng LOA ay legit, hindi po ginagamit para lamang mangikil, para magamit lamang sa korupsyon. And we have a member of the PEZA here, Mr. Terezo. Okay. Ano po kayo dun sa PEZA?
Sir, I am the Director General of PEZA.
Ilan po ang locator sa PEZA ninyo?
There's about more than 3,000 locator
3,000. Now, don't tell me, dyan sa 3,000 locators ninyo, walang violators dyan na flag down ng customs at BIR. Don't tell me. Meron, tama? Mali.
Well, we have been receiving copies of the laws issued by BIR and BOCs. So we're willing to
Kaya nga,
coordinate
so
it.
what happened to those LOAs?
Wala pa akong feedback from the
See?
issuances.
You see, Mr. Chair? Ano na nga sa mga LOAs? Wala pang feedback. Wala pa kasi nagkaaregluhan na. At alam mo yung sinasabi kanina, Mr. Pangap, mag-import ng raw materials free of duties and taxes with the condition na yan i-re-export. At doon kikita ang gobyerno dahil magpa-file ng income tax yung may-ari ng locator. Kaya dapat BIR, lahat na may-ari ng locator, minomonitor ninyo. Yung ini-import ng, tuturuan ko kayo, kuha kayo ng ballpen at papel. Hindi ako nabibiro. Get a pencil and paper. Lahat na mga ini-import na mga locator, kasi free of duties and taxes yan. I'll give an example. Mag-export ng 1 million worth of, say, tela para gawin ng long sleeve. Kasama sa tela dyan, kung ilang yarda, nandiyan yung butones, sinulid, etc. 1 million. Sa kondisyon yan ay i-re-export after na magawa na. Pero wag ka, hindi i-re-export yan. Kasi nga, wala nga naman talang silang processing factory in the first place. At bakit naaprubahan ng customs? Now, dapat yan, sa scheduled re-exporting ng finished product, nandyan dapat yung BIR, binubuksan yung container. Tama? At kung nakalusot man yan, yung may-ari ng locator, tatanungin mo, yung pinasok mo na worth 1 million na raw materials, may records dyan, may computation kayo dapat dyan, kung magkano yan kapag naging finished product na. Finished products, those materials. And then magkano maging income tax ng locator. Ganun lang po kasimple. Kaso, Mr. Chair, hindi nangyayari eh. Kaya dapat, it's time that we have to revisit our law regarding these locators because it's being abused. It's being abused. Meron pang isang locator dito sa may bandang Caloocan. Mr. Chair, paano tayo hindi ma-high blood dito, Mr. Chair? Libre ang importation ng kahit anong produkto. And then kapag nire-export, libre, exempted sa corporate tax. Sana ma. Saan ka nakita niyan? At pwede pa sila makadiscount sa mga empleyado. Andito lahat. We have to revisit this law that created these locators. Ulitin ko, libre tax, walang duties and taxes sa pagpasok ng raw materials para gawing finished product. Ang raw materials na yon. Pag na-export na, halimbawa talagang na-export, ang kikitain lang sana ng gobyerno sa income tax ng kumpanya na yon. Pero, in-exempt natin yung corporate income tax. And adding insult to injury, pati sa mga empleyado, allowed sila na magkaroon ng discount sa bayad. Pwede sila mag-underpay. Totoo yan. And I have proof. We have to revisit that law. Andito si Attorney Agnes de Venadera. Ma'am, kumusta po dyan sa SBMA? SBMA kayo, tama? Ay, sorry, Clark,
Sa Clark
tama?
po. Sa Clark po.
So, ilan na po ang mga na-issuean ng LOA dyan sa Clark sa pagkakaalam nyo?
Mr. Senator, wala po akong hawak na listahan. Pero alam ko pong merong nai-issuehan. Kaya lang po, hindi po, I have to be very candid na wala po ako nung listahan.
Kaya nga, pero di ba dapat, ma'am, pag merong mga na-issuean, mga violators dyan, you should be concerned and you should be updated. Para malaman mo kung sino dyan mga hausyaw or mga illegal. And then that's where you have to act. Kung nakita nyo na ito paulit-ulit na issue ng LOA, and then something must be wrong with this locator, and then I have to cancel his locator permit. Am I right? Or am I right?
Mr. Senator, doon po sa Clark Development Corporation, meron po kaming division, yung TFD na sinasabi namin. And they are in charge of monitoring all the importations of raw materials. Yung po sinasabi nyo, tama po kayo doon. At meron din pong proseso na ginagawa yung aming TFD division para po makita kung ang raw materials na inimport ay naipasok dun sa finished products. Meron pong ganon. And in fact, Mr. Senator, it is, we have on several occasions suspended the authority to operate, Mr. Senator.
Okay. Attorney De Venadera, marami sa mga locators nyo dyan sa Clark na wala silang processing factory. Right? You agree? Kasi pag sinabi mo you don't agree with me, then mapapahiya po kay madam.
Meron po kaming mga na-monitor na walang operations. At yung pong mga walang operations ay amin pong inaaksyonan na hindi mabigyan ng authority to operate kasi wala pong operations.
Salamat at hindi po kayo nagsinungaling. Kaya nga po, ang ibig sabihin, marami mga locators sa Pilipinas, sa different special economic zone, na nabigyan ng permit na hindi dapat sapagkat wala silang processing plant. Kasi ang condition yan, the raw materials are imported free of taxes and duties for you to process it into finished product para ma-re-export at kikita yung Pilipinas. Pero how can they process that when they don't have a planta? And alam yan, nyo dyan sa SBMA, alam ng BIR, alam ng Bureau of Customs. Naglulukuhan tayo. We have to stop this. Kailangan maimbestigahan talaga to, Mr. Chair. Itong mga free special economic zone, dito po talamak, billions and billions of pesos every year ang nawawala sa gobyerno, andyan sa special economic zone. Ang kumikita lang yung mga smuggler at ilan mga taga-customs at BIR. Mr. Chair, sana po magkaroon pa ng isang hearing na next time patawag po natin ang Bureau of Customs. Last question na lang po sa mga taga-BIR since nandito kayo. Ilan na po ang mga LOA na issue ninyo sa mga locators? How many LOAs? Magkano pong pinakamataas na diferensya? At ano po nangyari doon? I need a list.
Mr. Chair,
Can you provide us?
Senator Rafi, we will include that information po when we submit the requested information next hearing or as soon as possible, as soon as
And then
we get the information.
You should have a list of all the locators in the whole Philippines.
Yes, yes, sir.
Libo yan. So, ang tanong ko sa iyo, meron ba kayong way para ma-monitor kung ilan itong mga locators na ito, nasaan sila?
The investment promotion agencies are mandated to submit the list of locators in their respective jurisdictions. So we can have that list, Your Honor.
And then, paano po na monitor na itong mga locators na ito ay nagbabayad ng buwis? Is there a way for you to monitor that?
Yes, sir. They are along with the one of the information that they have to submit to BIR are tax payments. So we can have that also.
Nadudoktor naman po yung tax payments. I'll tell you what, Mr. Balastre III, pag sa scheduled exportation nila ng kanilang finished products, alam naman ng Bureau of Customs, puntahan nyo, especially itong mga high-valued, sinasabing raw materials na pinasok ng walang tax na binayad. Yung scheduled exportation nila, puntahan nyo, pabuksan nyo yung container. 10 out of 10, walang laman yung container. Kung meron man, basura. Kaya ang tawag dyan, ghost exportation or paper exportation. Totoo yan. Halos karamihan, hindi na lumalabas ng bansa. Kung meron man, kalahati lang, pero yung kalahati, naibenta na sa labas. Watch out for those. Yan lang po muna, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tulfo, for that opening statement. Few items that you mentioned, and the committee will take note of the items that you mentioned in your opening remarks. In fact, I was just conferring with the head of our Senate Tax Research Office. Indeed, part of our powers in the oversight is to request for the letter of authority from the BIR. And in fact, in the past, I was advised that the LOAs are being submitted to the committee as part of its oversight functions. So,
Meron na tayong LOA, Mr. Chair. Meron na tayong oversight committee para sa mga LOA.
meron tayong oversight committee here in the Senate. There are two, no? The one prescribed by the law is a joint oversight. However, I mentioned earlier that was not created because the House has not yet manifested their members. So we created our own here in the Senate, no? Motu proprio, through the Senate Committee Ways and Means. And because of its function as oversight, the BIR regularly submits to the committee a list of that LOA that you mentioned earlier. And the latest submission was when? Okay. But in the past, they have submitted. So since you have manifested your request and desire for the BIR to submit summary and a list of their LOA, we are instructing the BIR to submit to the committee a list of the letter of authority that were issued to date.
Mr. Chair, nabanggit nung, ang pangalan tong kasama natin?
Si head ho natin yan.
Sa head.
Oo, head ho natin yan. Ng
So,
STSRO.
meron ng mga sinabmit na LOA sa Senate. Nasaan yung mga LOA na yan? Can I see it? And then, I just need to look at it and then make a follow-up what happened to those LOAs. Kasi 9 out of 10 yung mga LOA na yon na-areglo na.
I was advised, Senator Tulfo, that the submission is in line with the compliance to the oversight. But since the oversight has not yet been convened, so there's no submission. But in the past,
okay.
the past Senate, yung mga dating Senate, it's been traditionally being submitted. No? So ngayon, since you've requested for that submission, we're now directing the BIR to submit all the LOA. Anong gusto nyo? Last 5 years?
Yes.
Last 3 years?
In the last 3 years, and then dapat meron tayong assigned na group of people na para gumawa po ng thorough follow-up. Ano nangyari sa mga LOA na yon? Magkano kinita ng gobyerno kung meron man out of those LOAs? At kung wala, then dapat may makasuhan.
That's also what I asked the head of our STSRO, that the LOA, submission of the LOAs is one thing, the analysis is the most important. No? So we're also directing the STSRO to analyze the submission and to give us their analysis as well as recommendation, and also furnish a copy of that analysis to the members of this committee.
Madali naman, Mr. Chair, madali lang naman yun. Alam mo, pinadala ng LOA si ABC Company dahil meron siyang deficiency worth, say, para mas mapabilis tayo, 1 million. Then, sasabihin natin sa BIR, ano nangyari sa LOA ni ABC nung pinadala such and such date, ano ang naging result? Magkano binayad niya para sa gobyerno? And I'm telling you, Mr. Chair, sa 1 million halimbawa, ang pumunta sa gobyerno, barya. Pero ang pumunta doon sa agency, people in that agency nagpadalang LOA, yun yung dambuhalang pera ang pumasok sa kanilang bulsa. Na short change yung ating gobyerno. Kaya nga sinasabi ko yung LOA na yan, Mr. Chair, it's about time i-monitor natin sa Senate. Dahil dyan nagkakapera ang maraming loko-loko at the expense of our government. Kawawa naman ating gobyerno. Lalo dito sa may ukay-ukay, Mr. Chair, not a single penny being paid. Not a single penny. Kumikita lang dito yung operator. And alam ng BIR, alam ng customs, andyan, nagkalat. Gala-gala kayo kahit sa lugar. Oo nga, kasi abot ka ng mga mahirap. Pero isipin din natin na namamatay din yung ating garment industry because they cannot compete. Itong mga ukay-ukay, napakamura. So itong mga local manufacturer ng RTWs, they can no longer compete. Some of them shut down even years ago. Ilan na kaya yung mga RTW factory locally na nag-shut down dahil nga hindi kayo mag-compete sa ukay-ukay? Alam natin na meron dyan na illegal at hindi nagbabayad ng tax, and yet we allow them to proliferate. And we're not doing anything. There's a law. PD 2033, 1986, RA 4653, 1966. Merong pagkakakulong nga ito, 2.5 years eh. 2.5 years to 2 years, fine of 20,000 pesos. This was back in 1966 pa. Dapat ngayon, milyon at makulong pa ng ilang taon. Yun lang, Mr. Chair, we have to watch out those LOAs. And then, last na lamang, itong sa Caloocan, i-revisit natin yung pagbigyan ng lisensya sa kanya. Mr. Chair, free na siya sa pag-import ng raw materials. And then pagdating sa pag-export niya, binibigyan siya ng tax break sa corporate income tax niya. So, lilitaw, zero. Ano pang kinita ng gobyerno natin dito? Adding insult to injury, binibigyan din siya ng break as far as pagsisweldo sa mga manggagawa. Libre pumasok yung kanyang mga kargamento. At kapag inilabas yan, libre din siya sa tax. Anong kagaguhan itong nangyari sa ating bayan? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Fo. I do agree that we all know this, and any honest taxpayer will probably know this, that the LOA is being weaponized by some unscrupulous individuals. And let's call a spade, no? And that's why I support the suggestion of Senator Raffy Tulfo to come up with an analysis on these LOAs being submitted in line with the oversight powers of the Senate. And that's why we're requesting and directing the BIR to submit to us all the LOAs in the last 5 years and last 3 years, and we're directing the STSRO to analyze and come up with recommendations to that effect. In the same manner, I also heard the good senator mentioned also ghost exportation and ghost and paper exportation. This should not happen because anything that goes out of the PEZA should pay customs duties as well as VAT. But obviously something is happening. No?
Mr. Chair, correction. Free po yung importation, pero pag in-export na yan, wala pa rin silang babayad. However, dun sa income tax nung exporter. Kaso nga, wala namang lumalabas. And then hindi na monitor ng BIR kung magkano yung na-export kung meron talaga. So kung sasabihin ng exporter ng locator, ang na-export ko lang piso, doon siya magbabayad sa halagang piso. Pero wag ka, ang in-export niya 100 million. Nilolokong BIR. Yung BIR, kunyari, nagtatanga-tangahan sa magkanong kadahilanan. Yun. And then another thing pa, BIR, you guys are listening, customs banded warehouse. Kaya nga dapat may mga taga-customs dito, Mr. Chair. Isa pa yan na inaabuso. Same concept. Libre ang mapapasok ng mga raw materials and then finished product, i-export, magbabayad ng tax yung may-ari ng custom banded warehouse. Ang tanong ko po sa inyo sa BIR, ilan ba ang nasa listahan nyo ng mga customs banded warehouse? You should have that.
Sorry, Your Honor, we don't have the information, but we can have it also.
Pero aware ka na there's such thing as customs
Yes,
banded
sir.
warehouse.
Yes, sir.
At in your experience, nakakarinig ka na mga taga-customs banded warehouse na issue ng LOA.
I think so, Your Honor. Yes.
Then when you come back next time, then show me those LOAs. And I'm very interested to know what happened to those LOAs.
Yes, Your Honor.
Paano sila hinandle?
Yes,
Paano
actually,
kumita ang
yes,
gobyerno doon sa LOAs that was issued to these customs banded warehouse? Dalawa yan, Mr. Chair. Meron tayong sa PEZA at meron tayong customs banded warehouse. Yung special economic zone, sa loob ng special economic zone, nagtatayo sila ng locator. Itong customs banded warehouse, kahit na dyan sa gilid-gilid, pwede sila magtayo. Andito pala, Mr. Chair, si Mr. Ralph De Parin.
Good morning,
Is Mr. De Parin here?
good morning, Senator Tulfo and Senator Gatchalian.
Ikaw pala, diyan ka lang, tahimik ka lang pala kanina. Hindi ka ba tumaas ng kamay?
I would.
Pwede ba natin siya ipa-under oath, Mr. Chair?
If the senator requests, will request the committee to conduct an oath to the representative of BOC, may I direct the Secretariat to conduct his oath to the representative of the BOC.
Tayo po tayo. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this public hearing?
Okay, please acknowledge through the mic.
Yes, I do.
Right, go ahead, sir.
Sir Ralph, ilan po, more or less, ang nasa listahan ng Bureau of Customs na mga customs banded warehouse?
Mr. Chair. Mr. Senator, actually, I am not, I don't have the information right now, but I can ask the proper office po.
Okay. Para
I apologize
maliwalagan
po.
tayo lahat, kasi kanina pa ako nagbabagit na customs banded warehouse, yung special economic zone, import, and then export, etc. Mas maganda manggagaling sa'yo. Paano natitreat? How do you treat yung customs banded warehouse? Yung proseso, pagpasok ng raw materials, titingin ka pa sa libro. Ako, alam ko na, hindi na ako titingin sa libro mo.
Mr. Senator, I'm actually, I have to be frank po, bagong hire lang din po ako so I'm still learning pa po actually.
Pag dumating po yung container nitong sa customs banded warehouse, pinapasok, nilalodge po yan sa EM2. E2M. Matapos may lodge sa E2M na sinasabi ko anong raw materials at saan pupunta. Dapat yan, guarded yan, sasamahan ng customs police papunta doon sa bodega. Pero kadalasan, hindi na sinasamahan. Bahala ka na dyan. Napag-usapan na. At dapat pagdating doon sa bodega, ipiprepare na yan for processing. Kaso doon sa bodega, wala namang processing plant, wala namang equipment to process that raw materials. Tama? Dapat periodically, kayo dyan sa Bureau of Customs, nag-inspect lahat ng mga may customs banded warehouse. Kasi yung iba, Mr. Chair, para mabigyan silang permit, mag-rent sila talaga ng bodega at nandiyan yung processing plant. Renta lang. After na may inspection, aprubahan, after 2 months, ililet go na yung parang show factory lang. Dapat, yun. Mano-mano, dapat computerized na. The moment na file ng entry, up to nagdating sa bodega na dapat may CCTV, and then up to after na yun po ay na-process, hanggang sa yun po ay i-re-export, tinatawagan niyo po yung BIR to let the BIR know na yung mga produktong pinasok ng libre sa tax, eto na, pwede nyo nang kalkulahin yung buwis. Nag-guess nyo po? Kaya nga, technical. Tsaka bago ka lang siguro, kahapon ka lang pumasok.
Few months pa lang po actually.
Kasi bumukas ka ng libro eh. Sige. Wala na. There's no point.
I
Sorry,
apologize po,
I
Mr.
don't blame him.
Senator.
There's no point talking to this gentleman. Pinadala dito yung talagang walang alam para ligawin tayo. Di ba? I don't blame you, sir. I don't blame you. I'm not gonna talk to you anymore kasi ayokong lalo ka madiin dito. Sorry. It's okay, sir.
Pasensya na po, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Senator.
Yes,
po.
sir. Okay po, sir.
But I will take note po kung ano po yung mga, ano ka po.
Kung
so,
sino
yung mga
nagpadala
pwede
dito sa-
niyong, hingiin na data po. I can of course it to the proper office po.
Sir, sino nagpadala sa iyo dito?
Legal service po, Senator.
Pagalitan mo.
Duly noted po.
Dapat siya dito nang nanginginig, hindi ikaw. Ikaw yung bago, ikaw ang pinaka-bago, ikaw yung pinadala rito.
Yes po. Duly noted po, Mr. Senator.
Okay, sige po. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tufo. Again, I'm also quite interested in this ghost exportation / paper exportation allegation. So we would like to, again, the committee is directing all the IPAs here present, CDC, PEZA, who are the other IPAs? Subic, I guess, no? The committee will send letters to all the IPAs to give us your position paper on this ghost exportation and paper exportation. This is happening within your jurisdictions, and would like to inquire if there is such phenomenon happening in your own jurisdictions. Senator Fo has requested to look at this issue, and the committee deems it necessary to drill down and to look at this issue. We'll not go into the details now, but please prepare your documents and your position paper to that effect. At the same time, we're also directing the customs to give us a list of the customs bonded warehouses operating in the country. There's also allegations that this customs bonded warehouses are being used as a way to smuggle in products, meaning they go into the bonded warehouse, they go out without paying any taxes. So we'd like to also inquire from the customs all the operating CBWs in the country, paying special focus to the one that was mentioned by Senator Tulfo in Caloocan. No? Just take note of that CBW. With that, so those are the three requests from Senator Tulfo, and the committee is directed to take note of that, and we will tackle that, those items in the next hearing.
Mr. Chair, last na lamang po, ano, ito, example tong sa OPCM, okay, na pinuntahan ng BIR. Itong OPCM is One Subic Premier Manufacturing Corporation and Hong Sim International Corporation. OPCM, One Subic Premier Manufacturing Corporation, and HIC, Hong Sim International Corporation. Okay. Now, nung puntahan po ito ng BIR, they admitted na hindi sila nagmamanufacture ng cigarette. Kasi ang deal, magpapasok sila ng raw materials to produce cigarettes, and then those cigarettes, pag na-produce na, i-re-export. Nung puntahan ng BIR, wala silang nakitang machine, wala silang nakitang mga sigarilyo na for export, kundi mga papel and printer na nagpiprint ng mga pangalan ng kung ano ng sigarilyo. At yun ay kanilang i-re-export. Yun ay mga papel na lang. Karton, boxes, na sinasabing kunyari, ABC cigarette. Tapos karton yan. Pag binuksan mo karton, puro wrapper. Wala talagang sigarilyo. Yun sinasabi ko, sample of paper export. Basura ang in-export. Nakita ng BIR to. Kaya nga, sa next hearing, gusto kong malaman anong nangyari doon sa ginawa ng BIR na pagpunta dito sa OPCM. Same thing with the Victoria Wave Special Economic Zone sa may Caloocan na nakitaan din sa Tala City, Caloocan City, na nakitaan din ng BIR ng mga violations. Anong nangyari doon sa ginawang pagpunta ng BIR na may nakita sila mga violations? How did they handle those violations? How was it handled? Anong naging resulta? Kumita bang gobyerno? O lalo na mayagpag itong dalawang kumpanya? Tuloy-tuloy yung violations. Yun lang po, Mr. Chair. Thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, we direct the committee secretary to send all the IPAs a letter requesting for a position paper on the ghost exports and the paper exports. And please instruct them to also prepare for a hearing later on. Okay? Thank you, Senator Rafi, and let me put on record my support to all the requests of Senator Rafi Tulfo. These are realities on the ground, and it's also part of the jurisdiction of the Committee on Ways and Means to look at all of these anomalies happening in our country. So with that, we'll go into the resolutions that are in the agenda today, and all the resolutions actually talk about the same thing, no? Inconsistency between the CREATE law and the implementing rules and regulations, thereby disadvantaging the domestic corporations who are in this, who are doing exports as well. And let me just flash on the screen the crux of the issue today, and we'll tackle this today, and we'll request the DOF to give us their opinion and updates to this inconsistency. So let me just flash on the screen just to do some recap. No? All right, so I think everyone's all familiar with this. In the CREATE law, in one of its provisions, Section 295, letter D of the NIRC. And let me just read. The VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases shall only apply to goods and services directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity by a registered business enterprise. And however, in the subsequent IRR dated June 21, 2021, and let me just, in Section 5, let me just read. Value-added tax, zero rating and exemption, exemption on importation, and VAT zero rating on local purchases apply to goods and services directly and exclusively used in the project and activity of export enterprises. And the amended IRR also reflected the same, no? That zero rating and VAT exemption are only can only be applied to registered export enterprise. So, and this led to a lot of confusion, and a lot of our domestic enterprises were disadvantaged. And we'd like to get some comments from the DOF and the DTI who issued the IRR, and just give us an update on this and what are the remedies that we can implement so that we can correct this inconsistency. Obviously, there's inconsistency, and we'd like to hear the opinion of the DOF, how this happened, and how do we move forward with this. Asek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone. We are yet to provide the committee assigned position paper. However, if I may be allowed to cite some of the comments that we have, the signed position paper that we submitted to the House of Representatives on the similar resolutions. Regarding the inconsistency of the IRR of the CREATE Act, we believe that actually it's consistent with the objectives of the law to create a more equitable tax incentives regime. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, that is performance-based, targeted, time-bound, and transparent. The CREATE Act, and this is quite an important point, merely harmonized the CREATE Act and the train law provisions. So some of the issues that might have that you mentioned, Mr. Chair, is actually in the train law provision. So the previous administration and the DOF initiated the CTRP during the past to reduce the poverty and address the inequality through a fairer, simpler, and more efficient tax system. Section 31 of the train law amended Section 106A2A of the National Internal Revenue Code of 1997. So the train law no longer considered export sales the sale of raw materials or packaging materials to an export-oriented enterprise whose export sales exceed 70%, and those considered export sales under EO 226, or otherwise known as the Omnibus Investment Code of 1987. And these are, again, the train law remove the 0% or the zero-rated VAT of these transactions on the condition of a successful establishment and implementation of an enhanced VAT refund system that grants refunds of creditable input tax within 90 days from the filing of the VAT refund. It must also be highlighted that in promulgating the train law, then President Duterte vetoed Sections 31 and 33 of the enrolled bill. Section 31 refers to the sale and delivery of goods to registered enterprises within a separate customs territory as provided under special laws. And these are the special economic zones that we have right now. And second, registered enterprises within TIESA, or the tourism enterprises zone within TIESA. And also Section 33, the services rendered to registered enterprises within a separate customs territory, and registered enterprises within TIESA. So then President Duterte reasoned that the said provisions go against the principle of limiting the VAT zero rating to direct exporters, hence the veto. The next point is that the evolution of tax laws on the treatment of VAT inside economic and free port zones have been amended and has thus limited the application of the cross-border doctrine. And now we go to the issue of the CBD, or the cross-border doctrine. Ecozones and free port zones are still considered separate customs territory to ensure the free flow or movement of goods. However, The cross-border doctrine has been rendered ineffectual through the passage of, the Train Law and the CREATE Act. Number one, because of the veto of Sections 31 and 33, again, that pertains to the separate customs territory. And second, Sections 294E and 295D of the Tax Code limits the VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases of goods and services directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity by a registered business enterprise. So it's the law itself which limited the flow of goods and services inside an economic zone. The third point is that the intent of Congress, and this is where we said that the IRR is actually aligned with the intent of Congress to make sure that the tax incentive regime is performance-based, targeted, time-bound, and transparent. The restriction on the VAT incentives to registered export enterprises under Rule 2, Section 5 of the CREATE Act IRR, as mentioned by the Chair, merely captures the policies of the Train Law and the CREATE Act in formulating an equitable tax incentives regime. As stated in Section 294 of the Tax Code, VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating may be granted. So it's not mandatory incentive. And in the House of Representatives, actually, they don't treat it as an incentive. As the incentive is not a mandatory provision, the IRR qualified the grant of VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity and prescribe a maximum period of 17 years from the date of registration, again in keeping with the time-bound principle of the CREATE Act. The continuous adoption of the cross-border doctrine is inconsistent with the objectives of the CREATE Act to develop a more equitable tax incentive regime. As can be gleaned from the phrase directly and exclusively used, again, as found in the CREATE Law. The next item, perhaps this is more on the update. We do recognize the issues that is related to the implementation of the law. The previous issuances by the BIR on VAT have been rendered ineffective by the Train Law as supplemented by the CREATE Law. And let me just go to the updates. So we have undertaken some steps and measures to resolve the VAT concerns of various sectors, most notably the following: the amendment to Rule 18, Section 5 of the IRR of the CREATE Act, which allows registered export enterprises whose income tax-based incentives have expired to continue enjoying the VAT zero rating on local purchases until the electronic sales reporting system of the BIR is fully operational. And second, allowing the registered business enterprises classified as domestic market enterprises located inside the zone during the transitory period to register as a VAT taxpayer. And what is the implication? The allowing them to register as VAT taxpayer also gives them the relief because it allows them to pass on the VAT and not be a burden to them as a cost. The next one is the issuance of BIR RMC numbers 24-2023 and 53-2023, which classified Ecozone Logistics Service Enterprises and Ecozone Developers and Operators as export enterprises to accord them the VAT exemption on importation and VAT zero rating on local purchases. And again, this is in response to some of the requests also and the letters that we received from the Ecozone developers themselves. The next one is the issuance of BIR RR 3-2023 to provide a negative list of expenses that are not considered as directly and exclusively used. So essentially, because the issue is that it limits what the locators can or what the exporters can can consider it as refundable for VAT purposes. Therefore, a negative list has been listed down. So they are not precluded. So we have the 6 negative lists that are not considered as direct and exclusive. But the export enterprises are also not precluded from further proving that that any local purchase of goods and services relating to their services can be refunded for VAT purposes. The issuance of BIR RMC 71-2023 and RMO 23-2023, dated June 23, 2023, streamlined the documentary requirements and procedures for filing and processing the VAT refund. And such modifications in the system include the reduction of documentary requirements from 30 to a minimum of 9 and a maximum of 17 documents. The non-submission of scanned copies of sales invoices, so they don't need to submit the scanned copies anymore, and the reduction in the number of offices to process the VAT refund claims. Just to also to inform the body regarding the grant of VAT zero rating also to domestic enterprises, even those inside the zone. There is a revenue implication on the part of the government if that will be adopted. Okay. So if the domestic enterprises are given the VAT incentive or the VAT zero rating, the estimated total revenue impact is close to 1.3 billion for year one, or 24.4 billion for 10 years. And the estimate is based on the zero-rated purchases of domestic enterprises located inside the economic zones or free port zones. Apart from the revenue application, there's also the equity. The grant of VAT incentives to registered domestic enterprises creates an uneven playing field or unfair competition in favor of those registered businesses providing the same goods and services which are not registered in any IPA, especially in the manner of costing and pricing of such goods and services. Finally, for information and for transparency, Mr. Chair, we would just like to inform the committee that the issues that the aforementioned Senate resolutions seek to address are related, if not similar, to the issues pending with the Supreme Court involving a petition for review filed by the Subic Bay Freeport Chamber of Commerce. The petition seeks to question the validity of the CREATE Act IRR and the relevant PIR and issuances. In addition, a petition for certiorari and prohibition involving the same issues, more specifically on the validity of the exclusion of DMEs, has also been filed before the Court of Tax Appeals by Sureste Properties, Inc. in February 2023. Finally, the House of Representatives has already passed the Create More Bill version in the committee just last week, Mr. Chair. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I comment on your position statement, let me go around and ask the opinion of the different stakeholders who are here. It's important to listen to our stakeholders because they are the frontliners and the businesses operating on the ground. And would like to hear their thoughts on this as to what are the implications of this IRR to the operations of our locators as well as IPAs in the country. So we'll request their comments on that, and they can also segue into their issues and challenges as to the implementation of CREATE so that we can save time. So we'll start off with Attorney De Venadera, who's the chairman and president of the CDC, for their thoughts on the IRR of CREATE as well as other issues pertaining to the implementation of CREATE.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Actually, in our submission, we also included a PowerPoint, and we would want to simplify the position. First and foremost, the IRR is supposed to be the IRR for the CREATE law, and it can never be justified to include any other law, much less the train law. Dapat merong kanyang IRR yon. So that's the first thing. Second, our locators and investors are confronted with two major difficulties one is the ease in doing business, and one is the consistency in policy. This particular subject matter boils down to the inconsistency in the policies. So we just focus on the next. We just focus on whether Rule 18, Section 5 of the implementing rules and regulations of RA 11534 or the CREATE Act is consistent with the intention of providing all registered business enterprises a transitory period of 10 years. Now, and we will show, next, we will show that on the left side is the provision of the CREATE law, and on the right side is the provision of the IRR that is supposed to implement the particular provision of the law. So Section 311, which is investments prior to the effectivity of the CREATE law. So we will see that what is stated here refers merely to the registered business enterprises. And also the CREATE IRR says and maintains that and mentions registered business enterprises currently availing of the 5% on gross income, or GIE, as more commonly known. And therefore, because we only refer to the RBEs, or registered business enterprises, then we can really infer that the intent is to apply the transitory provisions to all RBEs with no classification. Next, please. Now, on the Rule 18 of the CREATE IRR, Section 5, we're showing that under the CREATE Act, there is no such provision upon which Rule 18, Section 5 can be anchored. And we cannot have an IRR which is not supported by a provision of the law. Section 5 does not specifically correspond to any provision of the CREATE Act. So, and we have been repeating that. And because it does not correspond to any provision of CREATE Act, it should not be in the IRR. As simple as that. Next slide, please. Okay, applicability of the VAT exemption. Now, on the left side, we have the Section 294 on incentives. And it is still very, very clear that this shall apply to registered business enterprise. Now, in the IRR, in the attempt to implement this particular provision, there all of a sudden has a distinction. It's no longer registered business enterprise. It's now being mentioned that it is applicable to registered export enterprise. This has no basis, Your Honor, and that's our position. And on the next, Section 294 of the CREATE Act, again, refers to registered business enterprise. Now, the BIR revenue regulation, it's not an IRR, not part of the IRR, but it's an issuance by an agency of the DOF. Now, it now also makes distinction between not just the registered business enterprise, now it makes a distinction between a registered export enterprise and a registered domestic enterprise. Again, it has no basis under the law. And our position is that the IRR of the BIR, which is Rule 18, Section 5, the IRR of the CREATE Act, this particular provision must be recalled by DOF. And for the BIR Revenue Regulation 21-2021, again, because it's not supported by the provision of the CREATE Act, it must likewise be recalled. That's the position. Now, on another point, which is the cross-border doctrine, under the CREATE Act, there is already a definition, and it is a reiteration of a doctrine that the free port zones refer to an isolated and policed area adjacent to a port of entry which shall be operated and managed as a separate customs territory. In the BIR Revenue Memorandum Circular Number 24-2022, our first question is, prior to the CREATE law, what rule governs the sale of goods and services by a VAT-registered seller from the customs territory to enterprises located and registered within the economic zone or a free port? Of course, we said the position of CDC is that before the CREATE Act, ecozones and free port zones were by legal fiction regarded as foreign territories. And the sale of goods and services by a VAT-registered seller to registered enterprises in this economic and free port zones were treated as constructive exports subject to 0% VAT. Now, on the next question was this cross-border doctrine still remains to be applicable with the passage of the CREATE Act? Of course, our position, the position of CDC, is that the cross-border doctrine as applied to ecozones or free port zones has been rendered ineffectual and inoperative with these particular provisions. So the final query is it the intention of the law to make the cross-border doctrine in ecozone or free port zones inoperative or ineffectual for VAT purposes? Mr. Chairman, this is giving so much upheaval among our locators. And as emphasized by the framers of the CREATE law, this is not a revenue measure, but a performance incentive measure. And the net effect of the interpretation of the VAT is that since the local purchases now are subjected to VAT, our local producers are disadvantaged. Our locators would rather import and avail of the zero VAT rather than buy from our local producers. And that is particularly true in the Clark development, in the Clark Freeport zone, where we have many of our producers in the province of Pampanga. And before, when we did not have this kind of interpretation on our VAT, the economic activities in the region has gone up. In fact, Mr. Chairman, the poverty rate in Pampanga is 2.9%, as against the national poverty rate of 18%. So the unemployment is also quite low, and unemployment is more or less concentrated on the newly graduates. We have 1,161 locators, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, Federal President. And we have 137,000 workers, regular workers in the zone. Some of our locators have already deferred their expansion because when we do the costing, the VAT, the imposed on local purchases, will really be a game changer in their business models. So they would rather import. So the revenues that we're trying to generate, we're losing them, and I think in a worse manner, because the local purchases are being given up in favor of importations. Some of our locators, Mr. President, have gone down to 4-day work week because they are now managing their financial models. Some have already deferred their expansion precisely because now they cannot make their business models conform with the original. Mr. President, we have other competitors outside of the borders of the Philippines, and some of our locators are saying they are now looking into Vietnam to have their expansion, if not totally transfer. And we are very worried because because of the 1,161 locators that we already have now, and the more and more of the locators or future locators that President Marcos has invited in all his trips. So this is not something that is small time. This can be a game changer in maintaining our investors and in bringing more investors to our Freeport zones. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman De Vanadera. In your presentation, there's also, I was looking a copy of your presentation. There's also an OGCC opinion. May I request an explanation of this? I think this is a very important document that we need to put into the records.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Actually, before we filed anything, we went first to OGCC to get an opinion. And in the opinion of the OGCC, which is the statutory council of all GOCCs, it is stated that the IRR, particular IRR provisions that is in question is actually outside the ambit. And if I may just quote the very particular term that was used by OGCC in its opinion, in sum, we reiterate our position that first, the subject agencies exceeded the scope of their respective rulemaking powers in promulgating Section 5, Rule 18, and Section 2, Rule 5 of the CREATE Act IRR, as well as certain provisions in subject BIR issuances, as this deviated from the tenor and intent of the CREATE Act, thereby effectively limiting the employment of VAT zero rating for local purchases to goods and services directly and exclusively used in the registered project or activity only of REEs to the exclusion of DMEs. REEs meaning registered export enterprises, DMEs meaning domestic enterprises. Second, the business enterprises adversely affected by the promulgation of the CREATE Act IRR and the subject BIR issuances may invoke the expanded certiorari power of jurisdiction of the court to nullify the ultra vires acts of the subject agencies in issuing certain provisions of the CREATE Act IRR and the subject BIR issuances. However, for the information of this committee, Your Honor, we did not pursue this particular path of filing a petition. Instead, we went to Congress. We wrote the senators and the congressmen requesting that this be looked into in the exercise of the plenary power of both houses. So those are the very categorical statements of the opinion of OGCC. And we think it has very great bearing considering that OGCC is the statutory council of the GOCCs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson De Vanadera. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to focus on just one, no? Because this is quite concerning. That because of this inconsistent IRR, the locators are choosing to import, no? Because obviously they don't pay VAT and duties on it, rather than purchase from local suppliers. No? And the intention of the bill, and also intention of many, is to create a supply chain. And that's a weakness that we're trying to address in many fronts. I know Dan knows about this, no? In semiconductor, in automobiles, in shipbuilding. A lot of the comments, negative comments that I hear from potential investors, we don't have a robust supply chain. No? And because of this IRR, is now also creating a negative effect in that quest to improve our supply chain. Can you cite some examples, Madam Chairperson, on some companies that are who opted to import, no? And instead of buying locally? And do you have any data as to, let's say, if they buy locally, this is the price. If they import, this is the price, and how it affects the end product, no? Because we want to also simulate how this IRR is creating much more expensive products. In short, the products are more expensive, and making us less competitive. No? And if we are less competitive, then the business is also not being competitive, and probably they're losing money, you know, because of a high cost. So, do you have any simulation to that effect, or any examples that you can cite today, so that everyone will appreciate the real effects of this provision? No? The provision is just words, but there are also tangible effects to the products. No?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will cite an example of Roy's Hotel. Roy's Hotel is the latest in the big hotels in Clark. But because the investors are Filipinos, they ordered furniture, all of their furniture, from Pampanga furniture makers. And then came this, and they slowed down in the completion also of ordering the furniture because, well, if you import from China, you get it at less cost. But I don't have exact figures. But because the owners of Roy's Hotel are Filipinos, they did not decide to import, but they slowed down. Now, the other one is we have very big expansion of Hilton. They are adding 600 rooms plus another building will be put up, I think another 400 rooms. Now they are in the process, they are in the construction stage now. But of course, they're now looking into bringing in or furnishing their hotels. And the suggestion, of course, of Clark Development Corporation is to give our local producers a chance to be able to furnish their hotels. But they're coming up with numbers. And malaki po yung difference, magiging difference. In terms of just to be able, maybe this committee will appreciate the kind of local support that CDC is giving to the local producers. We're coming up, and it's now being in their final stages of doing the interiors. We are having the showroom for our furniture done in Region 3. And this is supposed to push our local products into the mainstream of the supply chain within the Freeport zone, considering that we have over 1,000 exporters, locators. So I don't have the exact numbers, but we can do some pencil footing only on these two particular locators, Your Honor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. We'll request from the CDC some simulation, maybe a few businesses, 3, 4, 5 businesses, on how this provision affected their cost, affected their business model, and affected their overall investment outlook. You also mentioned earlier that some of them are either not expanding or reducing their size or maybe expanding outside. So maybe get some hard numbers, no, on how this provision affected their operations and their cost. So with that, I'll defer my questions because I have a few more, but we want to hear also our other source persons. We want to hear from PEZA, Mr. Panga, on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the position of the chairman that there are noted inconsistencies between the create law and its IRR, and the same IRR that was made as basis for the BIR RMC. So put together, the IRR and the RMCs are both flawed. And we have submitted the same position to Congress. I think no less than the chairman of the lower house, Ways and Means, already made a categorical position on the noted deficiencies. And so we shared the same position with CDC, with the rest of the industries. And while CDC made mention of the OGCC opinion, we also have a copy of the OSG opinion, sustaining the same arguments, particularly on the coverage of incentives, whether it should apply only to export, because on the wordings of the law it says RBEs, and then the other one on the applicability of the cross-border doctrine. Despite the amendments introduced in the IRR, OSG is of the opinion that the cross-border doctrine, by virtue of the separate customs territory vested in the ecozones, was never repealed in the CREATE law. And to us in PESA, this has been the selling point to our locators when they locate in an economic zone, because that's in keeping with the best practice of all free ports worldwide. Anything that you bring inside, it undergoes process, and for most part, our locators are export-oriented. So, but there are other issues that we'd like to bring up with the committee. Number one is we have yet to receive a categorical position from Congress or even the DOJ that the CREATE law, its application must be prospective in nature, because this will protect already those pre-CREATE enterprises pursuant to that sunset provision of the law, that they must enjoy full protection of the law because of that sunset. And what's happening now, Your Honor, is that because of the BIR RMCs, which were made to appear that these are even retroactive in application, even some host LGUs already took advantage by imposing fees and taxes on pre-CREATE. This should be undisturbed for the duration of the sunset period. The other issue also is on the putting a term limit on the tax and duty-free importation, the same being non-income tax-based. And so we're saying that the moment you remove this will definitely erode the competitiveness of the economic zones, because with that, then you bring in already items where you will be subject to payment of taxes and duties. And I don't see our export industries being viable the moment you receive this. And I think the other more compelling is on the short period for the sunset, even for the 17 years incentivized period, we look at a scenario where after locators will graduate to the regular income tax rate, and you look at the RCEP across ASEAN, we're the only economy offering 25% CIT rate together with Myanmar. And so with that will definitely signal exodus of especially of our foreign direct investors. We might not be viable anymore in hosting export-oriented industries in view of this competition across ASEAN. And so our request is for the committee to look into this. On the DMEs, Your Honor, in PESA, we never registered DMEs, so we never granted zero VAT on any DME. But moving forward, if that is the contemplation of the law, under the crate, we can now register domestic market-oriented enterprises. That's all. By the way, Your Honor, just a quick rejoinder. The three companies earlier mentioned by Senator Tulfo are not PESA registered. So we will submit our report in the next hearing. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We also invited the American Chamber of Commerce, AmCham. Any comments on the IRR as well as other issues that your members are encountering in the implementation of CREATE?
Morning, Mr. Chair. I'm also representing, by the way, the BPO sector, given that a large part of our sector are also American companies. So if the chair permits, I would like to speak as well on behalf of the BPO sector, since, as you know, we are largely affected by all these issuances, and we therefore appreciate the effort of the committee to actually call this hearing and to allow us to make manifestations with respect to the issues that have hounded us. I'll begin, Mr. Chair, considering that we have spoken about the VAT issue, but if later on permitted, I can also touch upon other issues that have arisen precisely because of the CREATE amendments. On the VAT issue, ever since the issuance, the very first issuance that truly impacted us was Revenue Regulations 9-2021, and this was passed in September, if I believe, in the year 2021. And in fact, together with the Semiconductors Association, we held a press conference, and we did make manifestation that this was going to be catastrophic to the entire export industry. And I think that was where it was initially brought up, that the impact was that there was going to be a wholesale migration of pretty much all the exporters to just procuring goods, for the most part goods from importations rather than local purchases. No? And as a consequence, the BIR's reaction to the same was that it deferred the implementation of that regulation, and it came up with Revenue Regulations 15-2021. But that being said, we knew that for a fact what was going to come back and haunt us was really the issue, the phrase that has been coming back and forth, which is the direct and exclusive. And I'd like to speak a little bit about some of the things that have already been mentioned, and for the most part, I think DG Teo Panga talked about the retention of the separate customs territory concept precisely because of the non-repeal of the same, despite the fact that there were a number of specific provisions that were repealed by CREATE when it was passed, and the fact that that specific provision in PESA law only gives a very clear signal that indeed the separate customs territory of PESA has to be retained. That notwithstanding, we knew that we were going to again get hit with the possible interpretation of directly and exclusively. But that being said, and I guess maybe deferring to the good faith of the administrative agencies that are tasked to, in fact, implement the same, we waited for the issuances that did come out. But the very first impact, and you probably are aware of this, Mr. Chair, was on the front of healthcare provision for the many employees that we have within our industry, which now numbers to around 1.7 million direct employees. And the interpretation initially given was by the BIR was that this is not covered. And of course, we as an association had to write the BIR, the DOF, and the DTI, the two later agencies being the component parts of what is known as the FIRB. And among the many things that we made mention, including the retention of the separate customs territory, was the fact that there is perhaps a lack of understanding of our industry. Because the analogy that we gave, Mr. Chair, is that while insurance, for instance, of equipment of those engaged in manufacturing was considered to be direct and exclusive, the HMO that we provide, the HMO coverage that we provide to our employees was not. And despite our full effort to try and veer away from analogizing that equipment is equivalent to the human resources that we implement in our industry, truth be told, we felt that that was really the way to go, which is to make everybody realize that this was how we treated the head count that we rely on to be able to deliver the services and generate the revenue in our industry. So there were a lot of, and I distinctly recall that several days before Christmas last year, Mr. Chair, there were a lot of very prominent HMOs that were already threatening to stop provision of healthcare services among our employees. No? Which I suppose resulted to the dialogues that were had, and which resulted to what ASEC Juvie talked about, which is the passage of Revenue Regulations 3-2021. I guess the reservation that the industry still has with the issuance, which is now known as the negative list issuance, Mr. Chair, is the fact that one is that from the beginning we have consistently taken the position that the interpretation of direct and exclusive must reside with the IPAs. And the two issues that we have with the current practice of having the BIR make the interpretation via the passage of implementing rules and regulations are number one. Obviously, there's an inherent conflict of interest because while on the one hand they are by mandate supposedly required to generate revenue, which I think ASEC Juvie also made mention is going to impact the revenue that the BIR will be able to deliver. I think more importantly, the proposition is that the IPAs need to be able to have that position precisely because they are the ones that interface with us from the cradle to the grave. They register us, they regulate us, and if in case we want to exit from the zone, they are the ones that need to seek to provide clearance to us. And I think also logic dictates that if you are asking if a certain expense is related to the operations of a certain enterprise, it would actually be the IPAs that would have the capacity and the competency to be able to make that determination. So as we speak, Mr. Chair, as you can glean from the issuances that are still currently existing, that power completely resides with the BIR. And despite the fact that, again, there was an attempt to supposedly, cure this issue, Mr. Chair, we understand from many of our members that some HMOs still go to the BIR, still get response that indeed, while not the entire headcount of all your companies would have to pay the VAT, there is that requirement to ensure that it is only with respect to those that are in operations. Within our industry, Mr. Chair, it is very difficult to confine and bifurcate operations from the non-operation segment. Because, for instance, in a company such as ours, which is numbering more than 100,000 indirect employees, as you can imagine, our HR, for instance, department is composed of more than 1,000 people. Because definitely this is something that needs to be carried out as a function. So I think, Mr. Chair, I'd like to, one last point about the VAT is that we'd like to echo what DG Teo Panga from PESA made mention. The ultimate issue that we have here, while one among many issues is the VAT, is our lack of competitiveness, if we insist on this. No? One thing that you will hear very often is that we change the rules in the middle of the game and all these incremental costs will just build up, and our ability to be able to price our services better compared and vis-a-vis our, for instance, our direct competitor, our most prominent competitors such as India, is eroded precisely because of these unnecessary costs. And if the thought is that we will anyway be able to recover it via a claim for refund, then there are technical stumbling blocks and hurdles that we need to account for. Among others is our ability to actually go down the path of registering so that we can refund. And secondly, Senator Raffy Tulfo spoke about some practices where if your intention is to file a claim for refund, at the end of the day, you might even end up with a negative because you will be assessed more than being given a claim for refund. and therefore this is really not something that we could take as an alternative. Which is why, Mr. Chair, when we, and if I may, when we were appearing in the lower house in the hearings for Create More, we made it very clear that our intention is really to support the position that we'd remove any authority and or jurisdiction over the BIR to be, if any interpretation needs to be made, obviously the more preferred route is that there is a reversion to how it was pre-create. Anyway, and as a last point, Mr. Chair, one thing that is not removed is the power of the BIR to conduct post-audit. So therefore, if there is any disbelief, and alluding to the point that was made by Senator Raffy Tulfo, that there are some unscrupulous enterprises that are taking this, taking advantage of all these tax benefits, the BIR is not left without any power because they can always issue assessments, and there is always the judiciary in the form of the Court of Tax Appeals to resolve any matter along those lines. And for companies such as ours, which definitely do not have any ill intent and only would want to generate revenues and employment for the Philippines, we are always ready, willing, and able to confront any issue. But if we allow for all this confusion to proliferate just because we are arming an agency to make that interpretation, again in conflict with its avowed mandate, then it will permit the situation where we now find ourselves in. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that comment. And in the same manner, I would like to ask some simulation. Like for example, I also heard lack of competitiveness, especially in the BPO sector. I know that we're not alone in the world. India is a fierce competitor when it comes to the BPO sector, and how this policy, especially on the IRR, affected the competitiveness of our BPO sector. The BPO sector is one sector that we personally I am very optimistic with. It's an inspiration in terms of job creation, in terms of foreign direct investments, foreign currency inflows. So it's an industry that we need to make sure that it's competitive, not protect, but competitive, in order so that you guys can constantly get new customers and also move up the value chain. Now, just a basic question: how did it affect the competitiveness of our BPO sector? But do you have any simulation that we can see? Because what I want to put on record is not only the mere legalese, the legal aspect of the inconsistency, but also how it affected industries, and reflect the peso value of that negative effect. Do we have that type of simulation?
Yeah, so we both have the macro and the micro. The industry association can most definitely submit studies to that effect, Mr. Chair. And maybe I alluded to the fact that if we were to take a look at it from a country versus country perspective, it's the Philippines versus India. But if I were allowed to maybe just illustrate from my company's perspective, Mr. Chair, so we're located in more than 50 countries in the world. And when we are engaged, for instance, by our clients, we have the ability and the autonomy to actually determine where to locate the services to be provided. So therefore, in the situations where we have that ability, we have a cost per head, for instance, to be able to make that delivery. When costs are increased precisely because of these situations, Senator, and sometimes it's not just a matter of imputing the incremental, for instance, because the VAT is 12%, it's not solely the 12%. Because as you can imagine, if we're unable to provide health care, that would just simply mean that attrition will increase. And attrition increasing will also increase our operational costs, right? And our inability to therefore deliver the services at price points that will be competitive will also decrease. What that does not mean, however, Senator, is that the company will lose. Because again, being a multinational company and language now being secondary, precisely because of the onset of AI, the ability to deliver the services through many channels like chat, email, and everything else, our ability or our competitiveness before that was driven by the fact that we spoke good English is no longer the main driver. So therefore, from this company's perspective, rather than locating them in the Philippines, it can very simply be located in Malaysia or even in Latin America, precisely because ultimately, the only consideration by our clients is where will we get the highest value for our dollar. So sometimes, Mr. Chair, again, it's not solely an issue of us competing with other countries, but it's a matter of the companies making a determination of where it is best to be able to locate, just so that we will be able to retain the client. We can make submissions, most definitely, Mr. Chair, that will support and give empirical numbers and data to illustrate this.
Yeah, thank you. That will really help us a lot. No? I think earlier, Chairperson De Manadera excellently explained the legal aspect. I would like to look at the economics aspect naman of this measure, of this IRR, no? And to really help the committee analyze this more holistically, more completely, and come up with the appropriate recommendation. So thank you very much to Attorney Montero. We call on the Japanese Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Shimoda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity this morning. I am Shigeru Shimoda, President of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industries of the Philippines, JCCIPI. Please allow me to express our opinion on CREATE Act, by which JCCIPI and our member companies have been experiencing one of the most critical issues. Incentives are one of the biggest deciding factors for Japanese companies or foreign companies considering expanding or investing in overseas. At a time when there is a need to review the supply chain that has become overly dependent on one Asian country, I'm not saying which one, but one Asian country, I respectfully say that the Philippines should not miss this opportunity to invite quite a big number of foreign investments. In response to population growth in the Philippines, job creation is essential. And for this purpose, we believe that inviting foreign capital is also essential. Attractive incentives should be offered to invite foreign investments, especially in manufacturing, to keep up with competitors from neighboring countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, or even still Thailand. The incentives provided before the enactment of the CREATE Act are the minimum required, and even more attractive proposals are expected to be introduced. On the other hand, if the rules are allowed to change midway through the game, Japanese investors will be forced to change their business plans, and some companies will be forced to withdraw from the Philippines. Potential investors from Japan may hesitate in making investment decisions due to the uncertainty. If the new law, such as CREATE Act, can change the game in the middle, we feel it may happen again. And our investment decisions cannot rely on such uncertainty factors. In order to restore a confidence in investment environment of the Philippines, it is essential that the reinstatement of the original PEZA incentives for the companies that had invested in the Philippines before the enactment of the CREATE Act. This is actually what I respectfully mentioned in our meeting with President Ferdinando Marcos Jr. on July 28, 2023. In addition to our strong request to bring back VAT-free incentives which our member companies in FESA did not have to apply VAT refund, we also strongly request the committee to reconsider the imposition of a sunset period for the 5% tax on gross income earned, or GIE, granted to the projects or activities registered prior to the enactment of the CREATE Act. The predictability and ease of compliance offered by the 5% GIE incentive in lieu of national and local taxes was a major factor for the decision of many investors from Japan to locate in the Philippines. Retention of the 5% GIE without a sunset period will improve confidence in the country's investment environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Shimoda. We call on Mr. Dan Lachica of CP.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To begin with, I support the statements of Attorney Mike representing IBPAP and AmCham, and also Shimoda-san from the Japan Chamber. As you know, the electronics industry has a lot of multinationals from the US and Japan and EU. In fact, I'll answer your question on the VAT on exports, and then I'll go to our topics. The VAT on constructive exporters, meaning the suppliers to exporters, actually is critical in terms of, well, it actually negates our parts localization plan for SAPI. We import about $25 billion of materials, and the strategy really is to localize that. As you mentioned earlier, investors look for a local supply chain. We've been successful. So far, we have localized about 300 million pesos in parts, and we're making progress on that. However, VAT imposed on these local suppliers will not only encourage our exporters to just import, but it'll also kill the local industry. When this came about, we did a survey of our members, and we estimated about 40,000 Filipinos losing their jobs when the exporters import. Because if you look at it, 12% VAT, even if you consider the logistics cost, it's still going to be cheaper to import than buy locally. For example, with the logistics costs in the Philippines, say, 40% higher than Vietnam, to compare a country. And worst case, it's 50% erosion on the VAT. Well, that's 6% is still 6%. So that would be the first point in hopefully making an argument towards removing the VAT on constructive exports, I should say. And then to the point of Shimoda-san, the CREATE, I think if I recall the CREATE More version from Congress, it kind of proposes an endpoint of 20% corporate income tax after the transition period. And that's simply not going to work. In fact, I would echo Shimoda-san's pitch to restore the 5%. And why is that? As you know, Mr. Chairman, our power costs, our logistics costs, our human labor costs, and cooling water costs are very high compared to our ASEAN neighbors. And when CREATE was being, discussed, I specifically mentioned to DOF at that time, it's okay to level the playing field in terms of the incentives. But before we do that, I made a strong appeal to level the playing field first in terms of our operating costs. Because if you are the CEO of a multinational, you will put your new products and technologies in a country where your unit cost is the lowest. And of course, with the Philippines losing the incentives and the high cost, it's not going to be in the Philippines. Unfortunately for our industry, a $49 billion export industry with 3 million direct and indirect workers, we can't really contend with this. We're not getting as much new products and technologies. And what will happen is, and we mentioned this during the hearings 6 years ago, the Senate with Senator Pia Cayetano, you will see an exodus of companies or capital flight at the very least. In fact, 6 years ago, we already reported a diversion of about $3 billion of investments that would have been, allocated to the Philippines. They've gone to China, to Vietnam, to Thailand, and to Malaysia at that time. Of late, there were several European countries, companies that have also exited the Philippines. And one in particular is amusing because the reason given was that, oh, global recession, high interest rates. Well, wait a minute, you're going to Vietnam. It's the same conditions in Vietnam. So they're really masking the real reasons, right? And you also look at the level of investments, the FDIs in the Philippines, which brings in the new technologies. We're getting like maybe 17%, 20% of what Vietnam is getting. And Vietnam, as you know, I think I've sent to your office what Vietnam is doing for the semiconductor industry. One in particular, the country manager of this U.S. company told the Secretary of Finance then, if we push through with this, our company will not expand in the Philippines. Well, we're not the boy who cried wolf. Create, push through. This company invested $1.3 billion in Vietnam instead of the Philippines. We could have had that. 10,000 workers, $1.3 billion investments. And it may just be the tip of the iceberg, Mr. Chairman. The other concern really is, and this was mentioned by our colleagues, is the authority of the IPA to make decisions in investments. I was elated to hear President Marcos during our November 15 meeting in San Francisco with the semiconductor companies. And what he mentioned, of course, I don't have the details, but this concerns with operating costs and incentives were brought up. And the President mentioned something along the lines of looking at FIRB, and he mentioned specifically PEZA, maybe giving PEZA some of the authority used to have. And again, I don't have the details. I don't want to preempt what's going to be done. But I think this is something that really would be welcome for the investors in terms of, as Shimoda-san said, this was the law before when they invested in the Philippines. Why are we changing it, right? So I see actually capital flight. I see reduced investments in the Philippines. And while the President talked about encouraging investments in semiconductors specifically, moving up the value chain in terms of IC design and semiconductor wafer fab, it's going to be an uphill climb to convince the American multinationals to do so accordingly. The other concern would be, I hear that, with the SIPP and create provisions, there are going to be special incentives for like R&D, training, even power costs. Our concern there is what kind of audit will BIR subject that to? Because as you know, VAT refunds, for instance, it takes decades. We have companies that have been waiting